Manly question and answer time on Alpha Male Podcast. The podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man in this modern society. Because it's timeless, strong, dominant, in control. Made in the image of God, and we don't apologize for that. So as you might deduce from a Q&A episode, it's going to be a mixed bag on varying topics. Before we get into that, if you've listened to a couple of episodes, and if you haven't, just a quick reminder, scroll down, hit some stars, leave a review. I'd appreciate that. And if you want to check out more, goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the questions and answers. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael MILITO. Welcome to the podcast. You guys ever see the old 1980s Batman movie? When I was growing up, my grandmother had that on VHS. And who knows how many times I saw that. There's a scene in there that I still remember, even though I don't own a TV. Batman is not in his costume, he's Bruce Wayne. Guy comes in, I think Joker, and he says, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." And then the Joker shoots him in the chest. Anyway, you guys want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Let's talk about nuts. Blue Diamond almonds. There's a bunch of different flavors. My all-time favorite flavor, since it has come up, we've chatted about it recently in the Patreon group, salt and vinegar. I like salt and vinegar. The salt and vinegar Blue Diamond almonds are awesome. No affiliation with Blue Diamond, it's just they're a readily available healthy snack. You can find another brand that's salt and vinegar. I'm sure they're delicious too, but salt and vinegar. Also, just a quick aside, if you're making your own biltong or jerky or whatever else, you can make your own salt and vinegar. I mean, salt and vinegar are pretty inexpensive, cheap things to have. They're also really good preps. As I have been told, and I wasn't there at the time, obviously, in ancient Rome, soldiers would carry that as a wound cleaning device, vinegar. It's good. It's good for a lot of things. Also, salt. Your body needs it. A lot of times in this modern American post-industrialization society, we get a lot of salt. If you've ever had a diet lacking in salt, you'll know how important it is. It's really important. Your body needs it. So might consider having some of those things in your preps for a lot of reasons. For cleaning, for preserving food, for making biltong, for all kinds of stuff. But salt and vinegar Blue Diamonds, my second favorite is one of their new flavors, Mexican street corn. It tastes way better than it sounds. If you've never lived in South LA, that kind of area, or been to Tijuana or Mexico, they do a very common thing, Mexican street corn. They might put mayonnaise on it and some spices or whatever. Again, it tastes better than it sounds, I think. It's really good. And these Blue Diamond Mexican street corn almonds are good. Also, if you ever find yourself in the hood in LA, that was LAPD, they may still make something called a ghetto dog. A ghetto dog, if for all those inquiring minds, is usually a tortilla with a hot dog and some chili on it. Maybe if you want to get fancy, a little piece of cilantro. Ghetto dog. Anyway, at least that was common vernacular at the time. With that, moving on from Blue Diamond almonds to maybe something a little bit more serious. Nuclear war. Now, I would argue that we have been in for a while, a year or two at least, a Cold War, and I would argue we're entering into a warm war. I looked at this, and this is 3 sources I've seen, not sources I just want to agree with, but NPR, BBC. We've decided to send tanks to the Ukraine. We are literally sending tanks to fight Russians. We are sending tanks to arm Russians' enemies to fight Russia. I don't think we did anything that brazen ever in the Cold War that I'm aware of. Maybe something top secret, but as far as just blatantly out in the open, let's arm Russians' enemies to fight Russia. Whatever your views on the Ukraine might be, take a deep breath and step back and think about that. Another thing I learned from a cop, get both sides of the story. Think about if you were Russia and the U.S. was literally arming your enemy to fight you. Really good tanks. Again, so be sober and think about that. Now, don't live in fear. I don't live in fear. Don't fear people that can kill the body and then after that can do nothing else to you. Fear God. Fear the one who can kill you and send you to hell. That's what Jesus says. That's what the Bible says. I don't live in fear of those things. But it's good to watch and be ready. I just put out another episode recently, a recast of one on nuclear war. Quick tip. And there's a lot that goes into this. Maybe go back and listen to that episode. But water. Water is obviously important, right? Now, if you're on city water and something big event happens, that's a problem. I don't know that I would trust city water in good times, Flint, Michigan, let alone in hard times. But if something bad really happens, it's likely you're not going to have power, which means you're likely not going to have city water. And if it's a nuclear event, that city water is likely open somewhere, which means it's not going to be safe to drink. Now you may be thinking, I have a well. Wells are great, and wells will protect most water from nuclear fallout, depending on the aquifer and things like that. But in general, you got a well, you're going to be good from most nuclear fallout. However, again, if there's no power, you're not sucking water out of a 150-foot well with a straw. You need infrastructure to do that. And well pumps require usually some pretty legit energy. So think about that. Now you can get some other infrastructure. Those old hand pumps are not as common as they used to be. They still exist. If you have one of those, great. If not, the easy thing to do is just put some water up in plastic containers. Just a simple plastic container can protect stuff from nuclear fallout. Is it the best thing? No, but throw some under your house, maybe inside, because you're not going to want to go outside anyway. Have some water stored up that you can get, because even if you're on a well and you go to turn on the water and there's no power, there's no water pressure, where's the water? Also, if you don't know, there usually is quite a bit of clean water stored up in hot water tanks. If the power goes out, you may be able to drain that hot water tank and get some drinkable water out of there. Also, the back of toilets. That may gross you out, but it's better than dying. The back of the toilet, clean water. Anyway, with that, some tips. Just watch and be ready. Now, we talked about nuts, but this one's for you gun nuts. I got asked on my opinions on the Sig Cross. The Sig Cross, if you don't know, to you may be genius, to others may be an abomination. It's like a modern chassis, quasi-AR looking bolt-action rifle. It may come in other calibers, but I'm aware that it comes in 6.5 Creedmoor, 308, and I've heard that it comes in 277 Fury, although I've never actually seen one in person. But I think I've seen it in print. But it's a bolt-action, pretty light rifle. Very unconventional looking, but it should do what most other bolt-action rifles do. Which begs the question, what is it for? If it's for some kind of tactical application, if I can, I want semi-auto. If it's for hunting, why not just get a more traditional hunting rifle? Remington 700, an older one, a Winchester Model 70, a really old one or a really new one, a Ruger M77. Even if you're on a budget of Savage Axis, what is that giving you that those aren't, other than looking cool? I'm not saying not to get one. You just want a different kind of bolt-action rifle, there you go. But think about what you're going to use it for, and not just can you do it, because you can do a lot of things with a lot of things. I can turn a screw with a pocket knife. I can hunt deer with a 22 long rifle. They're not good tools for the job. So what are you actually trying to do? And to me, it almost strikes me as a gun looking for a thing to do, not a gun to fill an actual application to do well. I could be wrong. It may be somebody's favorite rifle. I could see one as kind of a crossover if you lived in a restricted state where you can't have a semi-auto kind of full-powered rifle. It might be a good, rifle, a quasi-scout-ish rifle. You could mount iron sights on it. You could mount a decent scope on it, or whatever kind of optic, LPVO, forward-mounted scout scope. They're fairly light. They may be accurate. I can't verify that. I've never actually shot one. But those are some of my thoughts on the SIG Cross rifle. Certainly look cool. So there's that. Now, a question I got on Patreon from a new patron, and I'm very humbled and blessed. Thank you so much. I'm going to call this person L, because he didn't give me permission to use his name, I don't think. And his name is not super obscure, but it's pretty unique, so I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to call him L. He'll know who he is, and you guys hopefully will glean from this. Alright, so I'm going to read L's message. It's rather lengthy, and just say that I don't agree with some of the things that he says, but these are his words, and I want to represent him justly. So, there's a letter from L. Just found your podcast. Great content. When I look at the social media preparedness space, I see people preparing to bring the world they live in into an unknowable and potentially dangerous future without the suffering that must come with that change. Do you feel that what you are doing, do you feel this is what you are doing also? While I believe that without the strength of an awesomely solid faith in something more than ourselves, it is impossible to have real conviction. I am not a believer. In fact, I am not a good man. Yet I can benefit from your experience and become more physically and mentally fit, a better shooter, take your advice to heart, and gain survival experience through focused application of skills over time, while doing, rather than talking, something I am a vocal advocate of. How do you square teaching me with your faith? I hope this makes the public Q&A, and this is something I struggle with more and more. How to have conviction, true conviction, the sort that gives me a belief I would die or live for, while remaining a non-believer in the religious sense. Regardless, thank you for your podcast message and your time and dedication to producing it in these times. I'm going to read my written response to L and hopefully expound on it or clarify it. Well, hello there. And I said his name. Of course you should know I'm going to mention God first. I did not grow up a Christian. The old me has done things the new me hates to think of. Jesus did not call the righteous but sinners to repentance. David was a murderer, committed adultery with a colleague's wife, then sent him to be killed. Paul was persecuting the church, and Peter denied the Lord. All were sinners. All were saved. So it can be with you. Tying the Bible into what you said, I absolutely believe there will be suffering because Daniel, Jesus, Matthew 24, and Revelation, among others, tell me so. As for your question, and I restated his question, I'm not going to read his statement again. You guys should understand the context. I walk the walk, sir. This is me responding. I walk the walk, sir. I am no stranger to hardship. You may not have listened long enough to know, but I bugged out early. Wife and I live as neo-nomads. Off-grid is a sliding scale, but we live the life wholly or partially off-grid. Hunter-gatherer, bathing in rivers, and all. I also, if you listen to the bio, may surmise I'm no stranger to hard times. I, by God's grace, survived the collapse of a modern civilization. Iraq, Baghdad, was a modern metropolis when we invaded/liberated. Also, seen chaos in my roles here in law enforcement, and I'm under no illusion about how thin the veneer of polite society can be. That's a big reason I do the podcasts. So to expound on that, do I think times can get hard and struggles can be hard? Yes. I have lived through hard times. By God's grace, I have come back safely from war twice, and I've seen some horrific things I care to have never seen or never ever see again, and I certainly don't want to see here on American soil. But I know that it can happen. Also been in civil unrest scenarios in this country. I've seen cities that were normally function one day descend another day. I don't think this is giving too much away, but when I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters, one of the guys that worked for us on the opposite side of a protest, his son was killed by law enforcement, in a protest. And that is one of the reasons I do the podcast. We live in a very unique and strange time in human history where we have a surplus of food. We have a surplus of energy. The vast majority of Americans, Westerners, live kind of this nerf life. I'm not telling you not to enjoy. God gives us all things richly to enjoy. If you look throughout history, culture, civilizations, the greatest civilizations of the past have all collapsed. Look at Rome, look at Greece, look at Sumeria, feudal Japan, many dynasties of China, Babylon. And we're fairly young when it comes to that. Look at Rome. Rome was around, depending on how you want to quantify it, the Republic, the Caesars, Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople, whatever. It was around a long time, 1,000 years, and it fell. I'd encourage you to read, if you haven't, The Fate of Empires by Sir John Glubb. You'll likely find it for free in the public domain. It's a short read, maybe a couple of hours. It's fantastic. But yeah, I'm not under the illusion. The Bible, what I consider the ultimate authority, tells me, and Jesus, in his own words, says, there will be hard times that have never been seen on earth. And I'm a fairly enthusiastic student of history, and I know there's been some pretty hard times in the past. The Black Plague, the year 536, the sacking of Rome. But yeah, I'm under no illusion. I've also, as I alluded to, lived through some really hard, horrible times. And off-grid is a sliding scale if you count. Some people would say, oh, you have a generator. That doesn't count as off-grid. You're not sleeping in a bushcraft shelter made of sticks like Eeyore. That's not living off-grid. I've slept in places probably worse than that. But right now, I would say I'm off-grid. Fairly uncomfortable recording this to you now. But yeah, I'm under no illusion that things will get hard when everything collapses really hard. Tying this all back into faith, Paul says, I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. You talk about a man who is acquainted with hard times. Paul, beaten, shipwrecked, stoned, imprisoned. He was a man acquainted with hard times, and he said, I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. You talked about faith, and you said, you're not a believer. And let me tell you, the old me, the old man of me, I lived that life. I was miserable, even when I had the best of things. I grew up poor, and I thought if I had money and power and women, I would be happy. And God allowed me to have those things, to see there's nothing in them. I had a fancy house in California Hills. I had a powerful job. I wasn't a millionaire, but doing pretty good by worldly standards, especially for a poor boy from the South. LAPD, good reputation, pretty powerful, well-paying job, had a couple of cars. Things I hate to think about now, but I had more than one woman at a time. All the things that society and culture says is going to make you happy. Talking about having it easy, I was miserable. I was miserable to the point where I didn't want to live anymore, because there's nothing in those things. If you want a true, rich, abundant life, you got to stop living for the things of this world and live for something greater. There is nothing greater than God. Nothing greater than God. If you have everything in the world and you don't have God, you ain't got jack. If you have God, you have everything you'll ever need. That may sound simple, and it is simple, but it's true and it's powerful. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. And for by you I can run against a troop, by my God I can leap over a wall. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. These are but a few of the verses and promises of God. I once was a man who lived for myself. It's a hollow, empty existence. Now, I hope every day to be a man who lives for God. A better, much more abundant life. Not in things, not in shiny trinkets of Babylon, but in real, abundant life. And I would tell you, if you want that life, there's only one way. Jesus, He is the way, the truth, and the life. I may have had some more questions, but I think that is a good place to start wrapping up this episode. If you want to contact me, you have questions, you want to ask a question either to me just one-on-one or you want it in a Q&A or something, goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. Also, this podcast is supported by viewers like you. It is written, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. If you have it in your heart to give, give, and if not, don't, and don't feel guilty about it. But you can, there should be a Patreon link in the show notes, or again, goodshepherdtraining.com. I am humbled and blessed by all the patrons. In many, many ways. I am truly humbled that you tune in and give me some of your time. With that, I'm going to give you a tactical tip of the day, and then a tactical verse of the day. Antibiotics. Talked about times getting hard. I submit, if you're a prepper or survivalist, any kind of preparedness, you may have guns, you may have ammo, you may have food stored, which is all good. But I would submit, if you have an infection or a loved one has an infection, you would give everything you have. You would hand over every gun and everything you had if you needed antibiotics to save your life. Right now, antibiotics are cheap. I'm not telling you what to do on that. I'm telling you, look into it. Amoxicillin, doxycycline, not super expensive now, but again, you may trade every tangible thing you own on this earth for that if you needed it. So maybe look into that. The tactical verse of the day, there are many, many good ones. I've quoted several. I guess I'll recite the entirety of Psalm 23. Many people know part of that psalm, but the whole psalm is beautiful. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Thanks for listening, men. Have a blessed day.